They couldn't believe it, even when they saw it with their own eyes. Did you notice that not only did they not believe the women's word, but they were locked up in disbelieving when Jesus showed up, and then again the next Sunday, again they've locked themselves down. You know, Thomas's doubts have overwhelmed them. They could not believe their eyes. Second time Jesus shows up, and again, you know, they have to hear his voice. They have to touch him. They grasp it, and Jesus teases them. He says, "You believe because you see me. What bliss God will give to those who do not yet see me, and yet already believe." So here's the deal. We get to believe. Soon we will see Jesus. And what I'm asking in this sermon is, what will you see? Isn't this strange that we've got millions, probably, of pictures of Jesus, stained glass and sculpture and beautiful mosaics, but nobody who was an eyewitness 2,000 years ago did any drawing. Nobody even wrote down a description of Jesus. John the disciple was there that Easter night when Jesus showed up. 60 years later, John's now an old man, and he's in exile, locked up by the Caesar for his Christian witness, when the Easter man again barged in. And Jesus said, "Write, John, what you see." And John says, "When I saw him, I fell down at his feet like a dead man." What did you see, John? Well, there in our Revelation text, John gives a description of the way Jesus appeared to him. In the year 1498, Albrecht Dürer, the great artist, did a woodcut, sold lots of copies, made a good fortune for Dürer of John's vision. And it's too bad it's kind of in the dark here, but this is the strange thing here. It's actually on the next to last page in the bulletin too. But it's a picture of Jesus that's just so wild. And you look at it and go, what is this? It's wonderful, but it's just so bizarre. This is not the way we usually picture Jesus. But it's glorious. And in fact, when we look at the very details of it, it's all a beautiful glimpse of the living one. The deal is, this picture is written with Old Testament brushstrokes. So the book of Revelation is 22 chapters long. Count the individual verses there. There were 404 verses in Revelation. Guess how many times Revelation quotes the Old Testament? 404 verses. How many times can it be? Would anybody guess 518? So this last of the New Testament books is just filled with Old Testament imagery. Look at it like this. I'm at verse 12 in our Revelation text. John says, "I turned to see this voice that was speaking to me, and what did I see? 7 golden lampstands. And in the midst of the lampstand was one like a son of man." Like us, a real son of humanity, a son of Adam. But like us. At the same time, so different from us. Son of man, isn't it the way Jesus kept describing himself in the Gospels? Well, 1,500 years before, God told Moses, "Fashion 7 golden lampstands, pure gold. Place these 7 lamps in my temple." So this is a picture. Where's Jesus? He's in heaven. He's in God's temple. But see, there's more than that going on, because Jesus tells John right after our text, Jesus says, you see, these 7 lampstands are a representation of the 7 churches. You get these numbers in Revelation, and the number 7. It means the 3-in-1 God is getting his work done in the 4 corners of the world. So 7 means, Jesus is working through all of his churches. Where's Jesus? Remember he said, "I'll be with you always." So this picture is really no surprise. Where's Jesus? He's in the midst of his people, where they're lit up, where they're shining with his love. Remember how in the Sermon on the Mount Jesus says, you are what for the world? Light. You knew this already as kids. This little gospel light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. So here's Jesus promising. When you shine, people are going to see me. In your light, I will be there with you, and people will get a glimpse of heaven. Beautiful image. Jesus there with the candles. Look at this one. Verse 13. There he was, clothed with a long white robe and a golden sash around his chest. John sees Jesus dressed like God had Moses dressed the high priest when the priest brought the sacrifice to God's tabernacle. But this is a weird priest. Where's your sacrifice? Why don't you bring any blood? Well, he's the living one. He's already made the connection that we are one with God. So you get how John plays with these Old Testament pictures, and he gives us a glimpse of the risen one. Third one, verse 14. The hairs of his head are like white. Did you ever picture a white-haired Jesus? Like white wool, says John, like snow. I don't know how to break this to you, but some of us are starting to go gray here. So I looked, and it's the only reference to hair color I could find in the Bible is white, gray hair. It says in Proverbs 16, silver hair is a crown of splendor given to the life that God finds right. We should be proud of gray hair. It's a sign of our age, of God having made us right for a long time. It kind of raises the question, how old is Jesus? Well, 33 when he died. But see, that was 2,000 birthdays of Jesus ago. We've had a lot of Christmases since then, a lot of birthday celebrations. How old is Jesus? How big a cake does he need? 600 years before Christmas, God already showed himself to his prophet Daniel. Daniel says, I looked, and these thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days, he who has lived for endless years, sat on the central throne. His clothing was white as snow. Even the hair of his head was white like wool. How old is Jesus? We're going before the tomb. We're going before the womb. What John's picture of Jesus is showing us is that Jesus, our human brother, is how old? Older than dirt. Older than Adam. Old as the Ancient of Days. This is the everlasting one. Verse 14. His eyes were like flame of fire. Another Bible passage. Nothing in all of creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered. Everything laid naked before his eyes. Here's this Jesus with these flaming eyes. If you want to come and say, well, I've been pretty good, does Jesus see through that? But if you're almost afraid to come, what if he finds out? Does Jesus see? I saw that stuff a long time ago, Jesus will tell you. I already handled it. In fact, I see all of your enemies, and I will handle them. Eyes that pierce to watch out for us. Verse 15, this is a weird one. His feet were like burnished bronze, refined in the furnace. Well, he didn't think Jesus would have, this is a phrase from Daniel 2, feet of clay. The empires of this world look tough, but they've got clay feet, Daniel said. They just topple over finally. Jesus, Daniel saw him coming. This one is strong. Even his feet of a champion can stomp our enemies. Remember the scandal when that woman came to Jesus at the Pharisee's house. Luke tells us she stood behind Jesus at his feet, weeping. And she wet Jesus' feet with her tears. Then she let down her hair. Now, that was a shocker. I mean, that'd be like taking off your blouse today. And she wiped Jesus' feet, and she kissed his feet, and she poured perfume, this precious ointment, all over his feet, weeping and crying and wiping. And the Pharisees were disgusted. This woman has walked filthy places. She's dirty. And Jesus said to her, your sins are forgiven. Feet to stride over sin. Beautiful feet. Isaiah said, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. To bring us good news, Jesus climbed all the way up that Mount Calvary. So Easter night, there's John and his friends. Startled and in terror, says Luke, for they thought they saw a ghost. And Jesus says, why are you troubled? Why doubt? Look at my hands and feet. Feet. Beautiful, bizarre picture. Glowing feet like shiny bronze, refined in a furnace. These liquid feet as Jesus strides to the rescue of his people. He just incinerates to ashes any enemy that would dare to come against us. Again, verse 15 here. His voice was like the raging roar of many waters. Bible passage says how God spoke to us through the prophets and apostles. I mean, how many times did God talk with people? You got Moses and Samuel and David and Elijah and Isaiah. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Peter, Paul, James. God kept sending messenger after messenger. All of these voices finally flow together into one raging, roaring voice of the Lord. Anybody ever been to Niagara Falls? So isn't that cool? I mean, before you even can see the river, I mean, we were standing in the parking lot, and what do you hear? This roar. I mean, you would be crazy if you think you could stand under that waterfall and try to shove the roar back up the throat of the river. No way. There's no way that the roar of Jesus can be contained. He promised it. Matthew 24, the good news about my kingdom will flow through all this world, a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come. You know what a thrill ride is? You know what a thrill ride is at Niagara Falls? Anybody want to get in the barrel? But I think Jesus almost teases us. He says, my voice like a raging waterfall. Guess what? When you share my word with people, it's going to be a thrill ride. Watch what happens. His astounding word. So verse 16. In his right hand, 7 stars. He's got the whole world in his hands. So everything is in his hands. But this picture is even a little more particular, because then Jesus goes on to say in the verses after this, and these 7 stars are the 7 messengers of my 7 churches. In other words, Jesus is going to hold high. Jesus is going to make shine his preachers, his Sunday school teachers, his Bible class leaders, the Christian friends that are out there in a dark world sharing his good news. Whoever's a messenger, Jesus says, I've got you in my grip. Shine for me. Daniel says, Those who lead many to be right with God will shine like the stars forever and ever. Okay, Jesus, how do we lead people to get right with God? It's in his hand. All you got to do is show somebody Jesus' hands. Look at these hands. They're so muscular, callous of these carpenter hands. These hands, nail-pierced. Hands of God. Astounding. His love for you. Your brother. Your Lord. And this is really weird. Verse 16. From his mouth came a sharp, two-edged sword. Another Bible verse. The word of God is living and active like a double-edged sword. It cuts. How's God going to defend you? He could send angel armies. He probably often has. They love to jump at his command and protect his people. How's God going to defend you? Will it be miracles? It can be. It often is, you know. The nature's laws that were born of Jesus' command, they're happy to be broken at Jesus' command. But this passage has a different promise. It says, all of my supernatural, all of my spiritual power, Jesus promises, it flows from my mouth. This is my sword. When sin's fangs sink in, Jesus has this sword that cuts clean off the head of that snake with a single word, forgiven. When death wants to swallow us, the living one has a word that opens all the graves. Rise! When the devil wants to drag us down, here is heaven's King with a single word, ending our fear. Pointing to his hands, his side, his feet, his word, shalom. You've got peace with me. Shalom. His word, his sword. The last one here in verse 16. And his face shining like the sun. Already back in Isaiah's day, he got a glimpse of heaven. He said, the sun will no more be your light by day, nor the brightness of the moon shine on you. For the Lord himself will be your everlasting light, your God, your glory. Alfred Tennyson, remember the great poet of England in the Victorian age? One day he's out working in his garden, pruning his roses. And his friend comes to Tennyson, knowing Tennyson is a believer. And he's just having such a hard time, overwhelmed with his doubts. Finally, his friend cries out in despair, Tennyson, what does Christ mean to you? Tennyson calmly snips and he says, the Christ means to me what the sun means to these roses. What a picture. You know, Jesus, be our sunshine. Shine on us. Jesus, be our light. Be our life. Be our strength. Be our warmth. Be our aim. In your illustrious love, Lord, let us see you. You, the first, the last, the living one for us, you die. Show yourself to us alive evermore. You, with the keys of death and Hades themselves, in your own nail-pierced hand.